think a lot of us kind of like our eyes glazed over a bit because the idea was like rich people hide their money, right? And the idea is, yeah, we know already, Sleepy. What are we talking about? Really noted as really the biggest really collaboration in terms of journalism partnership across like different nations and things of that nature, right? And the papers really came from leaks from 14 different offshore services or service firms, and these firms basically just specialize in how to hide money. probably will surprise a lot of you guys, is just how prevalent the US is when it comes down to a place where a lot of people can go and face loose restrictions regarding really laundering money in general, or just money laundering and really how to buy property anonymously and things of that nature, right? And this is like, according to like Reuters in 2020, we're literally next up, right after the Cayman Islands and right in front of Switzerland. $11.3 trillion. It's really something to really understand just how shameless a lot of these guys are when they get up in front and they talk to people. You really got to get that through, because in particular we definitely have a problem today in terms of that in the US, but really having that understanding that you're talking to an ad campaign, like with a lot of these people. The idea and the lesson here, I think, is really told through really understanding two things. One, the planet of Venus and the zodiac sign of Pisces. brushed against this idea of in India there's a caste system. But the idea is really worth more understanding for a few different reasons, right? And among of which is really how rich people will separate themselves from poor people. A very serious thing that needs to be addressed in a lot of these religions, right? And I think in America we have an understanding with Christianity, but also you would be surprised about things like Buddhism, Hinduism, of course, I mean, Christians love pointing out Islam, but Islam does have real, they all have certain issues, I would say. To understanding the experience of a person and the experience of really just people in India altogether and the actual system, it's central to understand this social dynamic, because we'll talk about this a little later, because Britain, when it came down to the British came in and they said, hey, look, they smacked down this, quote unquote official law guide or whatever, and there's some things, there's certain things about it that kind of hold true, but there is still a very strong experience outside of that. these guys are known as the top class, right? The top of the line, and they hold control over schools and education. In this society, we have like this debate around like guns and gun ownership, right? And I think it needs to be really more accurately defined, because when we say things like, or when, you know, the left or the progressives, they say things like take away the guns, or take away all the guns, that is in no way the argument. That's not like that. It's not an accurate. That's not an accurate statement or accurate request, right? How that really can be understood is take away all of our guns as citizens. The idea was they coupled the oil and gas companies and the poisoning of the environment with the idea of government overreach, right? And the result was the result that they were looking for and they ultimately succeeded in was selling themselves to just the Republican base in general, right? They got the gun owners in the fight, and I mean they sold even a few trucks at the same time, and that was just brilliant. And I mean, I would you need to you absolutely need to rein in these oil companies, but I'm also pro gun ownership. How does that make sense? this concept of a standard citizen is going to really have to be explored as we talk about moving forward and fixing and repairing society in general. So, when I seen Cash's video, my mouth, I imagine my mouth actually dropped, right? Because this guy, he was talking about the migration crisis in New York. And I remember watching his videos like an absolute idiot, wondering what went wrong in this short amount of time. This could have been like a year or something, right? I was like, geez, really went crazy. Really important in terms of why I think it's worth mentioning is because Coffee shows a clip of Adam 22 where he says something that really sheds light on what I think many celebrities and influencers think when they decide to go down this route, and what the conclusion that they come to before they go down this route. And the idea is that everyone just kind of lets this slide. This kind of just, nobody's really getting in trouble for this. this was, I think we can't really, like, we got to give him that. He had a hard line, like it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to follow Trump completely off the cliff. But we need to understand something. When it came down to libertarians, freedom is a huge thing with these guys. So Trump approving Palantir to essentially get a centralized database, arguably that should have been the spit in the face that made them say, oh, you are absolutely out of line. When you think about the oil conglomerates who can, who are going to benefit from any type of regime change that comes from the Middle East, you probably want them in America if things go wrong. Like, you don't really want them on a private island somewhere if things go wrong. That we call them the Department of Defense, because they're doing absolutely nothing to make us a more resilient society, right? They're focused on really padding the pockets of defense contractors. 1/4 to 1/3 of all Pentagon contracts in the recent years have gone to 5 major weapons contractors. This idea of a military, it was actually more close. It was actually before this concept of, the nations. We had really more private militaries, right? Private militaries that belonged to individuals and groups of people that were simply paying them. This idea of private military, it's growing in popularity. It's not diminishing in popularity, it's growing. guys just went in and they got all this data, and then they go to the Pentagon and they sit down with everybody in the Pentagon and they want to talk to them, like formally. Interesting. Elon comes out himself to talk to these guys. It's crazy. He didn't. There was no meeting that I remember with anybody else. I must say, I love when like these weird tech freaks mix with psychology and they get in touch with their feelings, because they like, I mean, JD, I think it's pretty safe to say he is an opportunist, but like, I mean, when it comes down to people like Alex Karp, who works with Peter Thiel as well to own Palantir, they will literally say the quiet part out loud. Government, one, can absolutely rein in big tech from collecting data. The problem is that they are funded by big tech. Edward Snowden is in Russia for a reason, right? like they didn't just say, oh, well, you know what, you were right, we're gonna fix our ways, then let me just, let's hold people accountable like that. No, go to Russia because we'll kill you. this guy JD Vance, he seems to want us to accept this is kind of a new reality, right? And the idea is that government is just going to simply take part in the data collection that's going on, that's very much troublesome to begin with. And this art piece in general is around the concept of laundering money, right? So she's made this art piece, and it's really about really showcasing the idea of laundering money. This is important for a variety of reasons. One, because just the power of art is completely underestimated in our society, but I think this is one of the many uses that we can really use art for. I want you guys to picture like a politician having to tell you guys like, hey, the water is kind of running low. That idea of the politician coming out and having to say that, that's when it's way too late. Primary currency. And this is an idea that really came from understanding that England and the UK, they were once at the top, but they're not anymore, right? But they are doing okay.